The Business Owner's Journey. I'm Nick Berry, and I've got real business owners telling their real stories, sharing their real lessons and strategies so you don't have to figure it all out on your own. In this episode of the 12 Days of Business, I've got Sara Nay. Sara is the new CEO of Duct Tape Marketing. John Jantz, who was the CEO, has now moved to the Chief Innovation Officer, and Sara formerly was the COO and has now stepped into the CEO role with Duct Tape, and that was just announced like a week ago. So congratulations to both of them. She's going to do a fantastic job. So Sara and I had a conversation for the podcast a couple of months ago, and we talked about a variety of things, but there are a couple of topics that we got into that I feel like are really applicable for this time of year. This is a time of year where most business owners are at least talking about the need to reflect, to recharge, and doing their planning, like getting the battery ready to go for next year. Now, it doesn't always work out that way, but we should be doing those things. And so Sara and I, in our conversation, a couple of things that we talked about. Number one was burnout, recognizing and addressing burnout, how to look for the signs. And she shares in this episode the signs that she recognized in herself when she went through burnout. I wrote an article a few weeks ago about my own experience going through burnout. And one of the big signs for me was how disproportionate my reactions were to some things. There would be like small things that would occur, and my response sometimes would just be like all over the place, and that wasn't me. So that's when it kind of hit home, like something's going on here. But you need to know how to look for the signs. You need to find ways to recharge or find a new path. And Sara talks about that crossroads that she was at in her experience. Just remember, you're not going to win an award if you crash and burn. Like that's not noble. It's not an act of valor. So it's important that you find a way to recharge and avoid the burnout. It doesn't have to be something that you go through. Put the time and the energy and the thought into prevention and taking care of yourself. So that tied into the second thing that that Sara and I discussed, and it was the challenges and benefits that come along with delegation. And entrepreneurs are the questions that rumble around in your head, and sometimes it happens so fast you don't even realize it. But it's like, can I delegate? Should I delegate? What do I delegate? How do I delegate? A lot of the problem comes back to like there's this sense of control that we feel like we need to have. But one of the things Sara and I talk about very briefly in this conversation is like you're not losing control. And if you think about it like that, like you really shouldn't, you're not supposed to have that control over the things that need to be delegated. She has some great perspective on that. And then sprinkled throughout the entire conversation, you'll hear us talking about mindset, limiting beliefs. It's the things that we tell ourselves to justify the overworking, not delegating, clinging to things. And so the more aware that you can become of those habits, those patterns, the more you can start to like release their hold on you and make some of these things happen a little easier. Some of the things like delegation that theoretically could be pretty simple as an act, help you get through that like mental barrier that's preventing it. You have to remember, like, you've got important things to do running your business, and being a taskmaster is not those important things. Being someone who refuses to delegate is not the most important element or aspect of your role there. And you can't do the most important part of your job if your circuits are fried. So you kind of have to look at it like you have to put your oxygen mask on before you can take care of somebody else's. Like if we lose you because you were, for whatever reason, too stubborn, uninformed, unaware, doesn't really matter what the reason is. If we lose you due to just running you in the ground, then ultimately it only ends one way. So I'm in this too, have to take care of ourselves. And Sara shares some great perspective on that here in this conversation. Now, remember, make sure that you're following or subscribed so you get the entire 12 Days of Business series. If you prefer, I can email them to you. And I'm also going to include the episode pages, the exclusive guest profiles, and the other resources that I'm only sending these things out through email. So if you want to get those, go to nickberry.info/12 days. That's the number 12 days. Okay, now enjoy the show. So far, my podcast has kind of turned into conversations about being mentally tough, your mindset as a business owner, like how do the good ones do it, and how can I improve on it? So, what's your experience been? What's your take?
It's such an important piece to focus on. Being an entrepreneur, business owner is not easy. I work with a lot of people through our certification program that are just getting started, and it's challenging, but it's really rewarding as well. But you have to have a tough mental mindset, I think, to get through that. So a few of the things that I've worked on over the years is there's a lot of highs and lows in business, always. And John's always preached that to me over the years as well. Like, things are going to be challenging, but there's also really great times. And so I think you have to be mentally tough to get through those lows and understand that things will turn around in most cases. That's been one piece. An area that I see a lot of people struggle with as well is like getting close to burnout. And because it's a lot. And myself, I was close to burnout, I would say 7 or so years ago. And I took a step back. I remember, like, we have trails behind my house, and I remember going on a hike. And I remember coming down and thinking, like, why am I burnt out? Like, what, am I just not in the right industry? Am I not in the right role? Do I not like what we're doing anymore? Do I have too much on my plate? Am I spread too thin? There was just like all these possible factors I think that could lead to burnout. And what I realized in my specific situation was I was spread too thin and not in the right role. And so I had a conversation with John about that. And so that's back when I was doing all of our client work. And so I was managing all of our client engagements and all of our implementation team. And so it was just like too many people for me. And I was spread too thin. And so over time, like after I made that realization, we had the conversation of where are your strengths and what should you be doing? And that's when I started to shift into more of the COO role, because I really love training and educating and managing and teaching. Like, those are some of the things that I love to do, and not necessarily like the marketing side of things doesn't necessarily light me up, more of the operations and team management side of things. So I've shifted and grown into this role, and then we've hired people to run client engagements. And so we've basically replaced me out of that role. And so it did just come down to like deep thinking of like, I was doing too many roles and not the right ones. And so then I was able to bring in people, delegate, and then step into where I think my strengths truly are.
Yeah. Do you happen to remember whenever you kind of got to that place, like before you went on that hike, what were some of the symptoms? Like what was telling you like this is something ain't right here?
Yeah, just stress. I mean, it was a big piece, and just like not wanting to do it anymore.
Yeah.
I do remember like one specific moment. I was holding my daughter, who was a newborn at the time, and she was sick and she was home and she was on my chest. And I was like behind holding her, like on my phone, talking to a client about like a social media color for one of their posts, and just like debating back and forth. And I'm like, I can't even be here and like be present for my daughter right now when she's a newborn and obviously needs me. And so that was a big like wake up moment, that I needed to make a change and make a shift.
Man, yeah, if it involves the kids, it's like a kind of a gut punch, huh?
Yeah, and just a reminder of like, why am I doing what I'm doing? I'm working really hard, and I love what I do to be able to support my family and be there for them and have that flexibility to be there for them. I think that's the one of the great things about, working from home and being a bit of an entrepreneur mindset, is you have that flexibility to be there for your kids in a lot of cases when you need to be.
Hmm. What are you seeing out of the business owners that you guys are working with? How does it manifest in the conversations that you have? And how do you help them navigate their way through it? Because that's not really your job.
Yeah, it's not really my job, but I've gotten into it more and more just because there's such a need for it. I think I actually took a 8-month long mindset course because I'm interested in it all, but I also realize there's a huge need in it, especially for people just getting started. So like a few areas that I see people really struggling, like from a mindset standpoint, is this topic of delegation. Like it's hard when you're just getting started. Like it's easy to feel like you should just hold on to everything. And it's hard to start delegating because you're losing control, you're letting go, you don't have your hands into everything. And also from a financial perspective, when you're just getting started, it's harder to bring people in. So it's a bit of a risk in that sense. And so I think the whole delegation piece is a big thing. But I'm in the mindset of like, if someone can get me like 80% there by delegating it, that's a huge win. In my mind. And I will say like the biggest wins I've experienced over the years is like when you delegate to someone else and they end up doing it better than you. I think that's like such a huge win
Mm-hmm.
or better than you could have done it. So that's where I think a lot of people struggle early on is like, can I delegate? Should I delegate? What should I delegate? Fear of letting go is a big piece. Another mindset piece as well is I think a lot of people struggle with like labels as a topic, and so people have a lot of like negative labels that they put on themselves or other people put on them that aren't necessarily true. And so I'm bad at sales, or I'm not a great leader, or I'm bad at public speaking, or whatever it might be. And so I think it's really important to think about those different labels that you're telling yourself and really analyze like, are those true, or can you replace them with something a lot more positive? And so one of the things I struggled with early on is, and still get somewhat nervous today, is like the topic of public speaking. And I would just always be like, I'm too nervous to speak, or I'm not good at it, or I'll stumble over my words, or, like those are like the things that I would tell myself leading up to it. But now I've adopted the mindset of like, no, like it's normal to be nervous when you're getting up on stage for the first time. Like people have those energy or those feelings inside of them, but like go out there and provide value and connect with people, and you'll learn every single time. And so it's a bit of a shift in like, I'm not good at it to I'm still getting better at it every single time I do it. And that's helped.
Yeah.
Another area on mindset too, another piece that we talk a lot, or I talk a lot about, is like your relationship to failure and rejection. And so some people like don't want to put themselves out there because they're afraid that they'll fail or be rejected, which might happen. But I think if you can think about failure or rejection as an opportunity to grow and learn, so maybe you didn't get an opportunity, or the speaking thing didn't go as well as you had hoped. What can you learn from that to then do better next time? And so those are some of the key areas that I see a lot of people struggling with and needing to focus on in the
Yeah.
entrepreneurship space.
Yep. And I think, what I'm hearing you talk about there is a lot of it, the shift from a fixed mindset to an open or growth mindset, where it's like, you might not be good at this thing right now, but that's right now, that's a temporary state, right?
Yeah.
You're not as good as you want to be, right? It's a process and a journey, not a permanent state.
Yeah, yeah. Another example, like when people start recording videos for the first time, like if they're a business owner, we're like, record a video, they put on your homepage. Like we see this all the time when we're building websites with people. They're like, I can't record a video. Like that's terrifying. I'll be terrible and I'll stumble over my
Mm-hmm.
words. And it's like, you probably will stumble, and it will be really, really, really hard for your first one. But every single time you do it, it's going to get easier and easier and easier. And I think that's important to keep in mind. Like I launched a podcast a while ago. I'm not doing it anymore. And I remember like the first introduction I did for someone, I was like so nervous, and I like stumbled over it. And if like I went back and listened to that now, I'd be like, oh my goodness. But like by the time I did a handful of episodes in 20 and 30 and 40 and 50, like it was just easy and it rolled off my tongue, and I was never nervous, and it was just a conversation. And so I just think that's an important thing. Like if stuff feels really hard today, that's normal. And it should get easier if you're doing the right things.
Yep. And I think your perspective is going to evolve a lot too. Like you have this thing image in your mind. So going back to your initial podcast introduction that you said that you like, most people that would listen to it don't care about all the little
Yes,
things that you're finding wrong with
exactly.
it. They do not care. It's kind
Yep.
of like with the outfit that you're wearing or whatever else that you're worried about, that you're like, I got to make sure that this picture is like, most people don't really care as much as you do. So you figure that out, and then you can look back at things and be like, well, it wasn't very good. It was really good for me, like being my first one.
Yeah.
But most of the things that I was worried about never mattered. What mattered was that I got in there, got the first step taken. I knew what I was trying to work on, and I kept getting better at that thing.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
I mean, that's kind of brings our conversation full circle about like how hard it is as a business owner. That's really what you have to do, right? Because as a business owner, you're playing this game of who can handle the uncertainty and the complexity the best, because
Yep.
nobody knows who has what card. Like all you know is like the ones that are in your hand. Maybe there are some that are out on the table, and you've got to do the best you can do with it. And
Yep.
sometimes it's going to feel like you got pummeled, and sometimes it's going to feel like you can do no wrong. And neither one of those are usually true.
Yep.
But you have to be able to get like just use it as an opportunity to try to do a little bit better next time.
Yep, absolutely. And I think, as you were saying, like as a business owner, like a lot of your responsibility is understanding like what to do next for your business and then actually making a move towards that. And so you might not always pick the best path, but understanding like where you're trying to go and what you're trying to work towards is really important. But as we're talking about, like you might stumble along the way, but you at least have to have a path to work towards, and then start making those small steps every day to be working towards it. And so that's where like when we're doing our planning, we're thinking about like the 1 year and 3 year goals, and we're thinking about bigger picture, but then we're also breaking it down and saying, okay, what small steps do we need to do this quarter to start moving in that right direction?
Thank you so much for listening. If you found the show valuable, you can say thanks and show your support simply by taking a quick second to like, share, and comment on the show. You can also find more information about each of my guests, all of the resources from the show, and myself at nickberry.info/TBOJ.